We all know Winston Peters, the politician, but what do you know about Winston Peters, the person?
Winston is quite a unique character. You can say that everyone knows that, but what they don't know is about him as a person. He's raised in very rough circumstances. He's come up the hard way. He had a Māori father and a Scottish mother, and she was their force within their family. A lot of brothers and sisters, all of whom are very political, and they debate. They're all strong, well-educated people who came from a little whare with a dirt floor. So he is conservative Māori, and he has some very strict, one would say, Scottish values. But he's got a hell of a sense of humour. He enjoys socialising. He's quick and acute, and as I've said before, you can insult him and you can challenge him and you can push him. That's kind of, he's got a hide like a rhino, but he's got a memory like an elephant, and he remembers everything. The great advantage he brings to the political scene is deep institutional knowledge.
So what is it like? What is he like in a negotiation, going into these coalition talks right now with Christopher Luxon, but with all of this history, as you say, behind him?
It may surprise everyone, but he doesn't run them all on his own. I ran my patch. Winston gave me the flexibility and the room to manoeuvre. If he trusts you with the portfolio, it's your gig. You have to understand that there will be a cap level, and you've already done that work in establishing the policy settings through before the election, and everybody in your team has campaigned on that policy. So if you're true to the policy, if you don't stray outside of that, it's your gig. And bringing in the different portfolio holders or the spokespeople for the portfolios is what we did. And what I anticipate, if it gets to a point of negotiating a full coalition agreement, that's what's likely to happen. So Shane will have his say, and Mark Patterson will have his say, and Jenny will have his say, and Winston will be the moderator, the chairman of the negotiating panel. But I had total freedom. And then from that, I got the total backing.
So what does he demand in a negotiation?
Good question, Rebecca. I mean, what does he demand? Respect. He won't say it. There's an expectation, manners, courtesy, old-fashioned stuff really, but they are the basic tenets of forming a good relationship. And if you intend being in government or in an arrangement with a partner, be it business or be it the civil service or be it iwi relationships or be it government, relationships underpin everything. Confidence in the individual who's sitting across the table from you right now, watching the body language and interpreting what they're not saying is really important. Having someone at the table who's observing all of that.
And he's a master at that, isn't he? Soaking up a situation.
You can't pull the wool.
Well, Christopher Luxon has talked about finding chemistry in his relationships. It sounds a little romantic.
Tad romantic for a commercial, cutthroat corporate person. Yeah, it's unique. But,
how do you find chemistry with Winston, I suppose?
Well, it's easy. Look, if you having issues, things that are in common, and of course you wouldn't be at New Zealand First if you didn't have a hell of a lot of things in common with the leader of New Zealand First. That's pretty much a given. If he respects you for your background and what you've done and what you've achieved, you'll get that as a given, and I think he respects Luxon. He may not agree with everything, but he respects his background and respects what he's achieved. Achievement is everything. What you've done, not what you say you're going to do, what you've done. And that gives confidence to what you say you're going to do from here forward. And so those things will be, things that he's already noted, and so will his team. And there'll be lots of discussions with the team, and whether it's over a meal, over a beer, post a negotiation around what they saw, what they feel, how do they feel. And so Chris Luxon's, he's done this stuff. He knows that petulant comments on the sideline are not going to help your negotiations for a merger.
What are the landmines for Christopher Luxon that could blow this up?
The ones you lay yourself. That's it. It's the one you lay yourself. People are looking for confidence. Can they work with you? And it doesn't matter whether it's politics or whether it's business, and Chris should, and I'm assuming Chris knows that. Having clear understanding is where your limits are, but where you're prepared to listen and be flexible. To be sitting across the coalition negotiation table from someone, I'm going to move and I hope the camera keeps with me, who sits like that and talks to you over their shoulder, says a hell of a lot. The same person saying, well, why would you want to do that? Why? That sends a message. Don't be surprised when all four people at the table get up and walk out of the room, look at each other and think, well, that's a waste of time, isn't it? But so landmines, you lay yourself. Walk in with an open mind and be honest and clear about that. If you've got no-go areas in particular policy, and understand this, when we went through, there were 67 portfolios, 67. People don't contemplate that, they don't think about that. We had 980 policies that we'd either put out press statements on, taken positions on when legislation went through the House, or had advanced ourselves. That's what was on the table.
Well, it looks like Luxon will do a deal with New Zealand First almost no matter what, because he does need that insurance policy. Just having 61, being able to meet that 61 MP threshold. There's always somebody that flames out during a parliamentary term. But is it inevitable that Winston will go down that road, or is there benefit to the party too in being in opposition?
I tried to say that to one media commentator, to someone at one stage, and they said, "Oh, well, why would you want to do it? Why would you want to be in opposition?" There's a role and a purpose for Parliament, and that is for the government to govern and government to be held to account, and the people to express their views, whether that's through the support of the government or through the opposition. To be a good democracy, you have to have a good, strong opposition, someone who tests and challenges. The great thing about crossbench is you can support the stuff that you do agree with, and you can vote against the stuff you don't agree with. And that's the wonders of having a mixed member election. We still don't have an MMP parliament, by the way. People don't seem to understand that, and hence the debate right now. Can he form a government? Look at other parliaments and go to some of the Scandinavian countries, and they adopted the position that Mike Moore espoused and New Zealand First adopted, which is a cabinet of talent. If we were a nation which would contemplate an elected government saying, well, okay, I like that person in the Green Party, and I like that person to come in and do this, and that person in Labour and come and do that. If we were a country that could do that, we might have a government that's more reflective of the decisions the voters made in the MMP election, but we don't. We're still stuck in Westminster first past the post governance model. So there is an advantage in being in opposition, and that is you can play a major role for the nation as being and I'd have to say, given the way Labor's been decimated, who's going to be the opposition? Who's going to be an opposition with credibility?
And he also does well at the adversarial sort of stuff, doesn't he, Winston?
Yeah, but I love that.
Do you think that
with humour?
With humour, yeah. With humour. Do you think he'd want to be Deputy Prime Minister again?
Winston has, despite everything that's written, I've never, ever, ever heard Winston say, I want to be Prime Minister. The caucus says, well, you've got to be Deputy Prime Minister, because when you're at the cabinet table, when the budget round has been done and you've got 4 or 5 budget ministers headed up by Minister of Finance, who do you think controls? Minister of Finance. Well, you've got to have some clout. If you're in a formal coalition, it'll be a bit strange for you as the party who the government needed not to take the Deputy Prime Minister, and hence why New Zealand First has always in the past been keen to secure some sort of Minister Finance role somewhere, because Minister of Finance plays a big part in determining the budget, and your coalition agreement, if you're in that arrangement, if you're in a coalition arrangement, has to be resourced.
There is also in this potential arrangement the ACT Party.
Yep.
What is it between Winston and David Seymour?
It'll be whatever David wants it to be.
But what's the history there?
Look, a lot has been written about Winston. You go back in history. A lot was written about Jim Bolger and Winston, and for good, you could understand why. Jim Bolger removed Winston from cabinet, took his portfolios off of him, then expelled him from the party. A lot of reasons why commentators and observers would write what they wrote. But they probably went one step too far in saying that he would never do a deal. He's a forgiving person.
But what about Seymour?
I don't know if David's a forgiving person. I hope he is. But, you know, either way, there's banter on the election trail, and that's what it is. There's banter in the House. What probably never gets the focus, and it used to be more obvious when 3.2, the bar, was operating the way it was, and all the journos and all the MPs would come in there, and someone would be slapping someone on the back and say, that was a bit rude what you said in the House. Oh, yeah, but you deserved it, sort of. It was like a classic. It's what I love about Kiwi rugby and netball. What happens on the court, what happens on the field, stays there. And when you go into the club rooms afterwards, you toast each other, have a beer and have a yarn about it. And Parliament is like that. And so you can say these things, but there is a line where you put yourself, you know, in a spot that you may want to rethink later on as you get a little older and a little bit more experienced.
Finally, I heard that what is this time like around Parliament? You know, it's a big change, isn't it, for everybody on all sides? I
rang Kieran McAnulty yesterday. Well, we were playing telephone tag, and we finally got to talk, and I said to him, look, you know, for the short window of opportunity you had, you know, I take my hat off to you. You did a good job. But, you know, I know what it's like when you lose, and having been wiped out in 2 caucuses that were completely wiped out twice myself, I know. What people don't see is the cameras are focusing on the bright-eyed, bushy-tailed, you know, new kids coming to school sort of thing, and catching them at the door. That's one story. The other story is those that are in tears. The MPs who thought they were untouchable, whether they were seduced by the granite walls and the marble floors. As I used to say to my MPs, don't you dare remember where you came from, because that's where you're going back to. And some people lose sight of that. They feel it a lot, and particularly if you're a one-term MP, now you're gone, you know. It's heartbreaking for some people. It's shock, it's trauma. The different stages of grief play out, and as a whip you're running around, and you may be the whip that's just lost your seat too. So you're trying to hold it together while you counsel some of your team who are in despair. What's also not seen is the staff. And I've seen staff worried about their mortgage payments. I've seen staff worried about the hire purchase on their cars. I've seen staff who wish, on reflection, maybe they hadn't teamed up with New Zealand First. But people take a gamble with a political party. You get tarnished, your name gets associated, your CV says that. So there are all these things going through people's heads, and they know they've got to rush out and they've got to find a new job. Their contracts have ended, bang, they're gone. Ministerial staff the same. There's some pretty heartbreaking, you know, moments that I can reflect back on where you've had to, you know, stop what you're doing, stop thinking about yourself, sit down, have a cup of tea with that person who's really stressing out. They don't know if they're going to get another job because they were with your party. They don't know what that job might be, and they've got bills to pay. And that's the hard side of it, you know. Yeah, it's a bit tough. And the MP's the same. Then they go home. Then it's all over.